What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Wake and Jake College Football Show. This is going to be the third round of the playoffs preview. Strictly playoffs again this time around. We're only doing playoffs for the last few weeks, but don't worry, next week, once I recap, well, I guess not next week, but later this week when I recap the playoffs, I will start going through some of the coaching changes that happened this offseason or so far this offseason. Obviously, I'm sure there's a few more that will happen once these playoffs do officially wrap up, but and we'll talk about those when they happen. But I will start getting into kind of the coaching changes, and then when it comes time to preview the national championship game, that's when I'll start doing kind of getting into the conference recaps, I guess, looking back at the conferences and seeing how each one did, and then recapping the national championship, still going back looking through at all the conferences, and then we'll finally get into the transfer portal. So after the national championship, after that 5-day window or so that these players will have to enter their names into the portal, that's when I'll finally kind of go through and touch on all the big names that entered, which teams lost the most, which teams seemed to gain the most, Minnesota. And then after that, I don't know how often there's going to be a show. I don't know if it's going to be every week, once a week, or once every couple of weeks. It just kind of depends on news, what's going on, what's happening, that sort of thing. Honestly, though, I mean, it's January. We just got to get through February. National championship game's the 20th. February's right around the corner after that. And then spring ball starts to get into effect, late in March, April, May, and then we're right back into the swing of things. So, guys, the season's just ending, but it's also just beginning. So we've got so much more ahead of us. I'm so excited. But yeah, let's get high and let's talk some college football playoffs. Okay, we'll start with the Orange Bowl. Notre Dame and Penn State. I know I said it last time. I think I have to start putting some respect on Notre Dame, but I still struggle with it. I still feel like I can't do it. Notre Dame is a 1.5 point favorite, and I feel like that's about right. I would probably flip-flop it. I think I would have Penn State as the favorite, but what do I know? I'm not Vegas. I don't make the rules. I don't know shit. My concerns for Notre Dame that I had last week for against Georgia, those concerns are still there. They haven't gone away. The offense for Notre Dame has not looked great these playoffs, and I think that's a little skewed. I think that's misleading when you look at some of the stats. Defense has been good. I should say that the defense has been amazing. The defense has carried this team. Even the special teams has carried this team. But if we look at the offense, like take Indiana for example, against Indiana, if you take away one play, a 98-yard run, they really couldn't do much on the ground other than that one run. Yes, I know it was still one great play, one great run, but it was one. It wasn't consistent. Now, I would even say those numbers are still inflated because 34 carries for 95 yards, not great, and I think that's a little inflated. I think it should have been worse. It's just Indiana could not tackle. In the right spot, just could not convert or commit or get the tackle. Riley Leonard, 32 attempts to get 200 passing yards. Terrible. That's absolutely terrible. You should not have that many attempts just to only get 200. If it was 300, sure, fine. 32 attempts is great. 201 passing yards on 32 attempts, that's awful. And if we look against Georgia, that's where they had the most help from their special teams and defense. And really, if you look at that game too, if you take, I think it was like 45 seconds of game time, really the last like 30 seconds of the first half when Georgia had the ball, they were going to try to maybe get some points before halftime, and Notre Dame forces a turnover and gives the offense a 13-yard field. I mean, it took one play, 2 plays to score a touchdown, and boom, that's a 7-point swing right there. And then to open the second half, took a kickoff 98 yards for a touchdown. That's a 14-point swing in a matter of like 45 seconds of game time, roughly. Other than that, the other 50 minutes and like 15 seconds of game time, that offense could only manage 9 points. 4 of 15 on third and fourth down, 90 total passing yards on 24 attempts. That's not great. And the running backs could not get much on the ground. Now, Riley Leonard was able to move the ball some on the ground. He was giving that Georgia defense some fits, especially late in the game. But the running backs could not get much and could not get much through the air either. Overall, this offense makes me very nervous going up against a Penn State defense that ranks 8th in points allowed and 6th in yards allowed. And Notre Dame's strength is running the ball. Well, Penn State's defense is 9th in total rush yards allowed. They are a top 10 team in yards allowed. So it makes me nervous. It really does. I don't know if I trust this Notre Dame offense. It almost feels like they got somewhat lucky against Georgia. Kickoff return, turnover for a short field. Defense has been playing amazing. Now, for Penn State's defense, Abdul Carter is, I guess, still questionable for this game. I guess it sounds like he's hopeful to play. Sounds like they think he's going to play. But honestly, until we hear it for sure, see it in writing 2 hours before the game, who knows at this point, let's be honest. Now, when we look at Penn State, offensively, I think they are good enough to be able to move the ball against this Notre Dame defense. Their rushing attack with Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, good enough to move the ball. What makes me nervous is what we saw against Boise State. Some questionable play calling. Again, I don't know if it was bad play calls, if it was poorly executed, or what it was. I'm not on the sidelines. I'm not at the practices. I'm not listening in on the play calls. I have no idea. So I really can't. I have a hard time when I question coaching and, well, to some extent, coaching and play calling, just because it could have been a good play call. It's just maybe the receiver didn't do what they were supposed to. The quarterback missed a read, this or that. It could be a whole variety of things. But we just saw that they, against Boise, had so much success on the ground, running the ball. Allen and Singleton were killing it. And then they would throw in a passing play that just didn't seem like a great play. And all of a sudden it would put them in a bad situation, and you know what, they got to throw it again because it's 3rd and long now, and that deep shot didn't connect, and now we got to punt the ball and give Boise State another chance. Now, that defense stepped up, forced 3 turnovers in the 4th quarter. Boise was never really able to pull off that upset or make it close enough to make people nervous. I think Penn State kind of had that well in hand towards the end there. But again, I don't know if it's quarterback, receivers, or the play call itself. There was just some questionable moments when it came to the offense in that game. Just keep running the ball. Keep doing what's working. But one thing that does make me nervous for Penn State, maybe not necessarily in this game, but if they do have to face Texas or Ohio State in the national championship game, they have Tyler Warren. We all know about that, the tight end. He's fantastic. They don't have really any good receivers. There's nobody that actually scares you a lot. They'll have their moments, but there's nobody that scares you. That would make me nervous, looking ahead. Now, they've made it this far with this, so maybe I'm wrong to question that. It would make me nervous, though. Now, even though Notre Dame has won 2 playoff games, and even though their defense has been great, I still just get this uneasy feeling when it comes to Notre Dame winning this game. I go Penn State on this. They are the underdogs currently. Who knows how that will be once the game starts, but I've got Penn State on this one. All right, Cotton Bowl, Ohio State, Texas. This is being played in Texas, so I guess it's kind of a home game for Texas, but Ohio State fans do travel well. Ohio State is a 5.5-point favorite, and honestly, I mean, just based on these last 2 weeks, I feel like that's kind of a low number. Now it is being played in Texas, so maybe there's some advantage there, but 5.5 points feels low. And I feel like I almost don't need to preview this one because I feel like everybody's kind of on the same page when it comes to this game. But still got to preview it. It's still a big-time game. It's still the playoffs. But it's Ohio State all the way. This $20 million roster is finally clicking on all cylinders. And I just don't think that there's a team left that can beat them. Oregon was supposed to be that team, and that game was over in the first quarter. It wasn't even close. This Ohio State defense has been a menace. Over the course of these two playoff games, Tennessee and Oregon, 12 total sacks and 19 tackles for loss. They have been living in that backfield, especially against Oregon, who is supposed to have a good offensive line, so that was shocking. Both Tennessee and Oregon also had less than 300 yards of total offense. The one thing I guess you could knock Ohio State on is they haven't forced a turnover yet, but hasn't really mattered. Let's be honest. These games have been over by halftime. Offensively, again, just rolling. Everything's clicking. They've scored more than 40 points both times. Will Howard is completing nearly 75% of his passes for over 300 yards in both games. I think he's thrown like 5 touchdowns. He has thrown an interception, but whatever. Jeremiah Smith, he's the real MVP for this offense. 13 receptions, nearly 300 yards. He's got 290 and 4 touchdowns over these 2 games. I feel like every game plan, it's always just know where this guy is on the field. And somehow teams seem to forget that. I don't know. He's just that good at getting open, I guess. I don't know what's going on, but you got to cover Jeremiah Smith. Now I get it. You also got to cover Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate and all of these weapons that Ohio State has. And that's where it helps to have a $20 million roster. Even the running backs, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, they're both also rolling. They've been solid as they've ever been. You look at this team, and it is so hard not to lean heavily on Ohio State. And when you look at Texas, their defense has been great. Texas's defense has been great all year. But so had Oregon's defense, and so had Tennessee's. And look what Ohio State did to them. But then we also look at Texas defense, and like I said, they've been good all year. We've seen it. And we saw in the first playoff game, Texas did shut down Clemson a few times, stood strong in the red zone, all that stuff. Cade Klubnik still went for 300-plus yards, and T.J. Moore, a true freshman, went for 9 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. They kind of got torched. Yes, they won, but they kind of got torched. And against Arizona State, same thing. We saw Texas have some good stops, especially early on in that game, and I guess late in that game to some extent, I guess, even though they let them come back. But they bowed up in the red zone. They made some stops. But ultimately, Arizona State, marched their way back, especially Cam Scadaboo, forced overtime. Now Texas came away with a win, but you allowed Arizona State to come back, and you allowed Scadaboo to have over 250 yards of rushing, receiving, and passing. I mean, ultimately, this Texas defense is good, but we've seen them get torched twice in the last 2 games in 2 different ways. Once through the air, once on the ground. Kind of through the air with Scadaboo, but on the ground. And Ohio State has a deadly passing attack and a great 2-headed rushing attack. It makes me nervous for Texas. And offensively for Texas, I don't know what to expect either because it's just kind of been inconsistent all year. And I think Texas is best when they have a running game that is consistent and working. When they have to solely rely on Quinn Ewers, I think that's when sometimes it can go awry. I'm not saying every time, and I'm not saying Quinn Ewers is bad. Don't twist my words. I just think that's when Texas is best. So their best shot in this game is to get the run game going early and keep it going. Don't let it die. Because if Texas has to rely on Quinn Ewers alone against this Ohio State defense, I don't think Texas has a shot because I think Ohio State is going to be able to score on Texas. I lean heavily on Ohio State in this one. For my bets for these games, I mean, I've got a few for Ohio State. I'm struggling with the Penn State Notre Dame. So I've got Penn State money line. I don't want to take the spread because it's 1.5, and I don't love that number. I just don't bet 1.5. I typically just go straight to the money line at that point. So I got Penn State plus 100, even money. And I am leaning on Penn State Notre Dame under 45.5 because I don't think Notre Dame's offense is going to be able to score much against this Penn State defense. But what if Penn State pulls some fuck shit on offense and also can't score? I feel like this game could go under, but I can't commit to that one fully. So I lean under, but I'm not committing yet. But I do have Ohio State minus 5.5 at minus 105. I'm hammering that one. I'm hammering Ohio State over 29.5 points at minus 112. And I'm also going to take the over in Ohio State and Texas over 53.5 at minus 105. I think Ohio State's going to score. I'm not saying they're going to score 40 plus again, but I think they'll score 30 plus. And we've seen Oregon score a few points. We saw Tennessee score a few points. Texas offense is good enough to score a few points against Ohio State. So give me the over 53.5. I'll take it. That's all I got for my playoff preview. I thank y'all for joining me. I can't wait for these two games. I think they're going to be a lot of fun, especially this Penn State Notre Dame game. I will talk to you guys, in a few days here to recap the playoffs.